Hey guys, welcome back to Clockwork, Dan and Noodles for another breakdown of Requiem for the Rose King. We are back with a very confusing episode. As always, I'm going to try and help you walk through, understand what's going on, try and shed some slight historical light on some of the characters, show you what actually happened, what the anime is suggesting is going to happen. There is slight deviation from canon, obviously. This is a portrayal, a take on Shakespeare's own words, and even Shakespeare's words themselves were a fictional representation of what actually happened. It's going to be very interesting to see how the anime takes its route. Before we get going, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. In the next week, there is going to be the midway review going up on the channel. This is where I crown top 3 OPs, EDs, and current standing of top 3 anime of this season. Naturally, this is all going to change by the end, but it's always fun to see what my thoughts are halfway through the season, how I think things are progressing, and it also allows me to talk to everybody on the channel, because especially on a channel like this, people tune in for their favourite animes, breakdowns. Not everybody watches every single video, so it's nice to have you all together for the midway and the final reviews, because everyone can watch those. That's just me talking about anime in general. There is also a Discord channel too if you want a notification for when that goes up. I don't know when exactly it's going to go up in the next week. All I know is I want up on a channel soon, because as soon as we hit March, things get very confusing, as it's my birthday that month and I may be away and there's going to be some disruption to the airings, but I will let you guys know via the chat and via Discord. To episode 6, this anime in particular is actually going on to next season, so we're nowhere near the end of the story. This isn't halfway. This is due to go on to next season. If I do like it enough, this does do very well on the channel. Likewise, it is getting the most views out of all the videos. It may continue to next season on the channel as well. You guys will have to let me know if you want me to continue, but we're going to break down this episode, and there's a lot of shifting going on now, so it's going to get confusing, so we're going to break it down nice and simple. If I do slip up with a name, guys, please bear in mind there are now 2 Henrys in the story. There were 2 Richards in the story. It's gonna get confusing. If I slip up, it's not on purpose. I haven't done something stupid. Just bear in mind, I've got a lot of names I am juggling around. Last week, we saw Elizabeth's plan come into fruition. She plans to have a child and then dispose of Edward, because she doesn't need Edward. She'll need her kid, and she can have the kid ruling, and she can be the regent while the child is growing up. However, Elizabeth's plan is ruined this week by actually birthing a daughter, and the crown cannot pass down to a woman, sadly. It's only until the Tudors then this actually changes, because Henry has 2 daughters. Even in that sense, it goes to Edward first, and Edward is the youngest out of the 3, and then when Edward dies young, it goes to Elizabeth and Mary. Only until the Tudors where we see this shift, but at this point in time, it can only pass to a male regent. For example, Edward had died in battle and the child hadn't been born and Elizabeth hadn't had a son, it would naturally go to George. This week, again, we see a very bad decision being made by King Edward. Edward denies his brother George the wish to marry Isabel. He uses the excuse that there's people who do not appreciate how close he's become to Warwick, despite the fact this is very hypocritical of him, because he was the one who married someone in secret that everybody did not like. It was actually his marriage in the first place that caused all of these issues. He's the one who married Elizabeth behind everybody's backs, and thus backstabbing his confidant Warwick, and this is where half the issues have come from. Very bad decision making for Edward. King Edward gonna go down in this anime at least as the character who made the most bad decisions. We do also see women do have slight power. It comes down to how they use it. Elizabeth is blamed for dismissing the marriage to Isabel. George basically blames Elizabeth, not so much Edward. Elizabeth doesn't want Warwick to get a step up. She knows that if Warwick can marry into the princes, that's really bad, because then he's got an angle at getting at the throne, so she's trying to stop that. We are seeing here, if a woman was resourceful enough and if her husband was nice enough to listen to her, she could essentially get her opinions out there via the use of her husband. Elizabeth more so manipulating her husband, but we are seeing ways in which women in that period could be heard. This week we are going to focus on the revenge of Warwick. It was always going to happen. Nobody here should be shocked, despite the fact a lot of characters this week are very shocked by this turn of events. Why? Why are you shocked? You know he's unhappy. You know that your decisions caused an issue. You know you've basically backstabbed him. we end up going to France this week to see King Louis. I still can't remember what Louis is on the throne. I'm not going into it. There are many Louis on the throne. It's just King Louis. We're in France. House Lancaster pleading with the king to invade England, rescue Henry, who is currently inside the tower. We also know that Edward, Henry's son, actually sold his father out. The reason why Henry is now in the tower in the first place is because Edward was getting his own little bit of revenge. He has disowned his father. They're banking on trying to get Henry rescued. Henry maybe died during the attempt, and then put Edward on the throne. There's not just two people now after the throne. You've got to bear in mind here, we've got House Lancaster right here trying to get their own monarch on the throne. Warwick appears and seemingly sides with the Lancasters to overthrow Elizabeth and Edward. This here you have to take with a pinch of salt. Warwick is trying to get King Louis's armies. For now, he is siding with the Lancasters, but I do not believe he's actually fully on their side. He's basically being resourceful. This game of chess continuing throughout the entire episode. Margaret knows that she needs Warwick's inside help, inside support. She also needs someone stronger to take out the king because she's not in the best position herself. She hasn't forgiven Warwick. There's no actual friendship between these two, and when she does say I want love, not she's seeking to marry Warwick or anything, she needs that support. She's going to start playing Warwick as well, because you wouldn't suddenly give up all your cards if you knew the person was unreliable. Warwick's initial revenge plan gets a bump in the road, a nice bit of a roadblock, as the demand of Margaret is to send Anne to marry Edward. Anne marrying into House Lancaster. Obviously, this is going to be a break in the heart for poor Anne, who actually does like Richard. And this week we do see that Richard pretty much gives up on Anne and is convinced that Anne was using them. Just for those who aren't too familiar with the history of England, Anne actually is the one to marry Richard. We know right now that Edward likes Richard and currently calls Richard a her. But let's check back in with Richard right now, completely heartbroken. Inside Richard's head, we see the fear of abandonment really growing this week. Richard has been played in their mind by Anne, and they believe that Anne doesn't actually like them, and thankful to not have to pretend to like Richard anymore, even though we know that's not the case. We also have that torment again by the mother's hatred. Mother actually fires an arrow at Richard. Cycle of a repeating dream. Generally, if you have a repeating dream, it's because you need to address something. Something needs to be addressed. Richard's dream is of the throne. The throne is constantly now in Richard's head. Warwick makes his move. All the chess pieces are now about to be moved around the board. Imagery of the white rose laying tossed aside on the floor, cast aside. Warwick has now turned his back against House York. We have Anne and Edward, who are due to marry. Everybody is now heading to France apart from Richard. We have George and Isabel, who are now going to go marry in France as well. And the only person at this point who gets left behind, and that is quite ironic because of the dreams that Richard is actually having, is Richard. Initially, it seems Richard uses this as a strength. As they say, I thank you because now I'm not going to get distracted. Thanks to all of this, you've opened my eyes. The wall around Richard's heart is growing taller and taller. Something that does play into our favour this week is Edward unknowingly trying to have his marriage to Anne delayed. This works in our favour because it delays getting Anne a ring on her hand and it delays having that marriage there. Edward right now just wants to focus on overthrowing the king. He's also banking on having Richard's fate in his hands. Edward knows that if he does overthrow the king and he's able to get himself crowned, Edward wants to go on a throne, not George. Edward can have the fate of Richard given to him. Richard could basically become his plaything. It's also really odd that Richard doesn't react to seeing Edward. They have met before, they know who each other are, does not react to seeing a traitor inside the castle. Richard is, of course, House Lancaster. There's no reaction whatsoever from Richard. I'm very confused why there's no reaction. Just simply Edward being there in front of Richard is treason. Elizabeth is pregnant again, trying to go round 2 for trying to get the prince. Breakout now of war could be the nail in the coffin for the plan. If we have Edward die before Elizabeth's child is born. The moment that child is born, and that child is a son, the kingship, the crown will go to her child. So whoever is on the throne will be deemed as illegitimate. They won't have a claim to the throne, and the real king will be her child. But it will be risky because she will be on the run. If we do see Edward die and the child has yet to be born, the claim is naturally going to go to George. This is essentially what Warwick is banking on. He's banking on having George instead on the throne. Let's go into the war section now. We now have a breakout of war. France and House Lancaster, Warwick and George all on the same side. Edward is informed before the fight. George has now married to Isabel in secret in France behind his back. Edward, again making very bad decisions this week, decides to ignore his friends, does not decide to consolidate his forces, head back to London, make his position stronger. The best decision he could have made at this point was to go back. It's harder to invade somewhere like London than have a weak force on the fields that you can definitely overthrow quite easily, or as we see, we get a surprise night attack. Richard continues to have the same dream over and over, vision of the throne with Daddy Richard and the black impure wings. It is actually Richard who learns the hard way about George and Warwick's betrayal. I still stand by my word, it should not be a surprise. Richard is surprised, just as unrealistic. It's very obvious what's going on. It's being very blatantly broadcasted right in front of everybody's faces. This week, Richard has to use their body to get out of a situation and feign being a woman and escape. Thankfully, a good uniting. So we have something good happen this week for Richard. Richard unites with Catesby. And now if you can't remember who Catesby is the original hand to Richard, the one who was there to look after Richard as Richard grew up. Richard and Catesby, great, I'm happy they're together because Catesby is a good person. Catesby ended up going to serve, I think it was Hastings initially for a bit, and then now he's come back. Edward has been captured, thus the crown has been stripped from his head. At this moment in time, it's not exactly clear who is currently wearing the crown. It's either between Warwick and it's between George. The one with the better claim to the throne is George. Even Elizabeth believes it's Warwick who's sitting on the throne. It's just sad the moment of capture. Edward is faced by the truth, the betrayal of his own brother and his friend right in front of him. The hunt now begins. Warwick is trying to hunt down Elizabeth. He does state that he also wants Elizabeth in the tower. I don't know what she picks up. She picks up something and I'm not sure. I have a feeling she's going to reverse Uno things. Remember when Richard said he couldn't remember who she was? I bet that her husband was actually serving House Lancaster. And the thing in her hand is actually going to be a rose. It's going to be a white rose. And she's going to maybe do a reverse Uno. I don't think it's really going to help very much either or, because I don't think she knows that Lancaster is currently paired with Warwick, but she's going to try and bank on it, allowing her son to be born. If her child is born a boy, that boy is going to have a claim to the throne stronger than George is going to have. It will currently jump George. It won't be his anymore. During this section as well, we see Duke of Buckingham is a very smart person. We actually see Buckingham playing chess when we first come in, and Buckingham has figured out that if George is placed on the throne, the second in line to the throne is suddenly going to be Richard. Duke of Buckingham likes Richard. Duke of Buckingham would rather have Richard on the throne. It was the Duke of Buckingham who initially sowed the seeds last week in Richard's head of becoming a king. We see some clever plays going on. Throws in his hat with Richard, so the hunt for Richard has now begun. At this point, Richard unknowingly has two people who would actually support them as king. But Richard at this point is now trying to save Edward. They have deduced that neither George, neither Warwick belong on the throne. Obviously, we don't want Lancaster rule on the throne. In Richard's head, the best person to be on the throne is Edward, which is a surprising thing because I don't see Edward's choice of marriage, which seemed to irritate Richard at one point. Richard is trying to find the lesser of two evils. I don't want these two on the throne because that's betrayal and they're not good people. I guess at this point, the lesser of two evils is to keep Edward on the throne. Things are starting to heat up. Things are getting very confusing now. To summarise, we've got 3 people who are vying for the throne, minus Richard. We're not putting Richard into the mix. Richard currently is happy to not be on the throne, doesn't believe they belong there. Right now, we've got Edward. He has been captured. George and Warwick. Technically, Warwick doesn't really have a claim to the throne. It's more George on that side. Bear in mind as well, Warwick paired up with the Lancasters, King Louis, the France. France might want to try and put their monarch on the throne as well. But we've also got Edward, Henry's son. The Lancasters are trying to put Edward on the throne. They don't actually like Henry. So even if Henry is released, they're not going to let him sit on the throne. Or if they have him sit on the throne, they'll have him abdicate and give it to Edward. They're going to have Edward on the throne. Isn't going to work for Warwick because Warwick can't control the Lancasters. Even though they struck up this truce, Warwick can't control her. She doesn't like him. We're going to have a clash when it comes down to George versus Edward. Those two are the two going to head right now. That is where we are in our story. Hopefully I've made it a little bit clearer if it's quite confusing. There's a lot of names being thrown around. Plot is moving pretty quickly, but we are covering over 30 years here in the space of 24 episodes. It has to be cut down somehow. We are yet to even be close to having Richard on the throne. But we are starting to see the seeds starting to grow, mainly with the Duke of Buckingham. He's the one currently very actively trying to put Richard on the throne. Things are getting interesting. I hope you guys are looking after yourselves. Have had a good weekend. Make sure you are treating yourselves right. Have a good day, guys. Bye-bye.